Hi and welcome back. This is our series on renovating our small holding. In part one of the series, I showed you renovating our beautiful little cottage. In this part two, I'm going to show you preparing our land. So join me. Hi, my name's Fiona. We love our small holding. It's not the largest, but it is incredibly productive. We have this garden growing area and we also have a field. In the field, we have our vegetable plot where we grow most of our own vegetables. We have the majority of our fruit production where, again, we grow all of our own fruit unless I want a banana because I can't grow that. And we have eggs and meat from our chickens who are also in that area. When we first came here, we wouldn't have been able to do all of that straight away. There was a lot of work we needed to do. This garden was very, very overgrown, and the field, when we viewed the property, was rough, but didn't look too bad. By the time we took possession a few weeks later, the property had deteriorated significantly, and the field was hugely overgrown, and you're not going to believe some of those photographs when you see them. Today I'm going to take you through the journey we had to get this able to produce all of that food for us. To begin with, our priorities were to get the field as a blank canvas, but to give ourselves a little oasis of calm here in the garden. We wanted somewhere to sit in the evenings where it would feel like we'd actually achieved something because it would look pretty and calm and tranquil. So it may not seem a priority as a small holder, but to us, that's what we wanted. I'll show you two major problems which we had when we started out. One was a very, very high water table, and we had to put land drainage in to sort that out. But we also found we had an inadequate septic tank with a soakaway which ran uphill. And I'm going to show you what that meant and how we resolved that problem. So let's get started. When we were searching for the right property, space to allow us to grow food was important, so that meant not just land, but flat or gently sloping land. That's so that food cultivation would not only be possible, but would be straightforward. This photograph shows a section of the field when we came to view the cottage. It met all of the right criteria. It was flat and grassed, so was presentable. We couldn't see any obvious signs of problems, and we were reassured that we could turn it into a really productive growing area. The cottage garden was a little overgrown, but there was a reasonable structure. There were some lovely plants such as goldenrod and oxeye daisies that I could see. The only problem I could find was that because of their thuggish nature, these two plants had been allowed to overtake and choke out all of the other plants. That just meant a little thinning out. By the time all of the paperwork had gone through, the field was out of control. This photo doesn't look so bad, but bear in mind these weeds are over 6 foot tall. There were grasses, nettles and thorned bramble bushes that sprung up everywhere. We wanted to try and clear the land ourselves, so Hugh got out the brush cutter. You can clearly see just how high the weeds were. We knew it would take a significant amount of time to clear everything, but after 2 days of both of us taking it in turns to use that brush cutter, we had barely scratched the surface. We decided to call for help. We contacted a local farm services company who brought a tractor and flail cutter. That machine made very, very short work of clearing the field. I remember wishing we'd done this from day one, but it taught us a valuable lesson, to be honest, about our limitations and to make sure that we asked for help early on. While all of this was going on, I was trying to create our little oasis of calm with a traditional cottage garden. This was an uphill battle, and I had no choice but to hand dig out the area. Bringing heavy farm machinery this close to the house could have resulted in disaster. One of the biggest issues I encountered was a patch of daylilies. They are very, very beautiful, but they had been allowed to grow unchecked. This meant there was a patch around 2 metres by 2 metres in size where the rhizomes were so closely packed I was struggling to find any soil. It was very slow progress, but eventually I had cleared 2 patches at the front of the house and regrassed the rest of the garden. Once the land was clear, there was still a lot to do before it was in this wonderful growing state. At this point, we were coming into the first winter in our property, and we were finding some issues indoors. We were finding that the bath and the shower weren't draining quite sufficiently, and even the toilet was struggling a little bit at times. Given the house had a septic tank, we did what we think was reasonable for any human being in these circumstances and decided to get the septic tank pumped out. So out came the engineer, and as he was pumping out the tank, he said, I think you've got a problem here. And I looked down, held my nose because of the smell, and said, don't really understand. So he said, what should happen is dirty water should come out of your house, go into your septic tank, anything heavy should drop to the bottom, and any water that's left over should go downhill through your soakaway through your land and drain out into that land. So I said, well, what's the problem? And he said, well, water's coming back from your land into your septic tank. It should be going out, not in. I think you need to call a drainage engineer. So I found a drainage engineer, and out he came, and what he did was he dug some inspection test holes around the property, and at best he found that the water table was only 4 inches below the surface of the soil. That can cause all sorts of problems. It can mean more damp for the house because clearly it's very close to that foundation line for the property. It would mean that any root vegetables we grow in the property would actually potentially rot out below a 4-inch depth. It would mean that any trees we planted would probably die because their roots would rot too. So that could be disastrous. What he recommended was a land drainage system. Let's have a look at what that meant for us. The land drainage was a fairly simple job, even though it meant digging up the field. We live in an area of England called the Fens. The Fens are all at or around sea level and involve a sophisticated series of dikes which drain excess water from the land out to sea. The dike that used to drain the water from our cottage had been allowed to silt up over the years, so we needed to replace this and connect it back into the drainage network. We dug out a U-shaped trench into the field which outputs into the master network. So how does this drainage work? Well, into the trench a liner is placed and gravel is then poured on top. The gravel acts as a simple filter for the water from the land, preventing soil from entering the drainage pipe. The drainage pipe is the blue pipe you can see in the photograph. It contains very small perforations, and those allow water to seep in. The whole system is on a slight slope. That allows it to drain water out to the master network. Once all of that is done, more gravel is poured on top, and then the whole structure is covered with soil. That's it. That's the whole drainage system. But we had dug up the entire field to install it. And this is the area of land where we found our second big problem. Today it looks great. We've got part of our orchard, we've got part of our chicken enclosure, and they all seem to absolutely love it here. When we bought the property, it was listed as having a winter's pond in this corner, which sounds beautifully romantic. I had visions of sitting out here with a glass of wine, watching newts and frogs play. Wasn't quite like that. When we bought the property, it was a very dry spell, so there was no sign of any standing water. By the time we got to the winter and late autumn, when we found the drainage problems, this pond had appeared. Unfortunately, this lovely romantic notion disappeared very, very quickly because it turned out to be raw sewage outfall from the septic tank. We, of course, had just dug up the field for drainage to go in. But again, we called out that engineer to have a look, and he found 2 things. The first was that the septic tank wasn't large enough for the property and would need to be replaced, and the second was that the soakaway was woefully inadequate and had been fitted incorrectly, so we would need to dig the field up again to put a new soakaway in. Now let me take you through that process so you can see how it actually happened. This photograph shows the same corner of ground with all of the giant weeds removed. The larger area of green in the centre of the photograph is a so-called winter pond. Clearly it's green because it's getting a huge amount of nutrients from the raw sewage. If you're wondering what the structure on the left is, this is a rotten and woodwormed shed that houses an old outside toilet. The toilet didn't work, so we decided to remove the whole thing. The first work that we needed to do was to dig out the old soil pipe that connected the last inspection point from the house to the old septic tank. This had collapsed. That was yet another problem that we found. This trench though also served as the trench for the new soil pipe to go in. An extremely large hole was dug to house the new septic tank, which is shaped like a giant bubble. What you can see here is only the pipe that extends out of that bubble. Once the lid is fitted, it acts both as an inspection point and somewhere that the tank can be pumped out from. The lid is fitted and the hole is backfilled. The next thing we need to do is deal with the soak away. The septic tank won't be effective without replacing that too. The soak away work involved two elements. The first was to remove the old ineffective soak away. Here you can see a drainage contractor had also levelled the ground and filled in that nasty stinky hole where the raw sewage used to come out. The second was to dig out a new soakaway. That soakaway is exactly the same structure as the drainage system, so it incorporates a liner, gravel and a perforated pipe. The difference is that the soakaway doesn't connect to the external master dike system. Instead, it's dug out in a herringbone pattern, and the water is discharged into the land. We decided to extend the herringbone structure to the entire length of the field so that we had a better chance of excess water being distributed evenly within the field. One very important aspect for us in preparing this area for growing was to install hedging all the way around the property. This looks mature, and it is now, but it didn't exist when we came to this land. We opted for native hedging, which gives us two big advantages. Because it's 60% hawthorn, the first advantage is it gives us security because those thorns are long and very pointy. The second advantage that it gives us is it acts as a windbreak, so nothing that we grow here is likely to be wind damaged. So let me show you how we went about planting. To save ourselves some money, we bought bare root hedging plants, which are available in winter as the plants are dormant. They do look like sticks, which can be disappointing when they first arrive. Sometimes it wasn't convenient for us to plant them, then the weather would warm up and the plants would start to wake up. That's what happened here, which is why the sticks are now in plant pots. Planting the hedge was straightforward, but it was hard work given the length of hedges we were dealing with. It just meant digging a trench of sufficient depth to accommodate the roots on the bare root plants, and then to pop each plant in at the recommended spacing from the plant nursery. After a few weeks, the plants were sprouting and starting to establish. All we had to do then was to be patient until the hedge was fully mature. Patience is actually the most difficult part, or at least it was for us. So that's one of our hedge lines going in. Now I want to show you an area where a hedge line was taken out, which has now been reclaimed for part of the chicken enclosure, as you can see. To give you an idea of scale, I'm going to walk all the way down to the bottom. So I'm starting from here, and I'm still going. Still going. And here we are, this is where it ended. Now from my right hand corner over there to the end of this elder tree, which is the tree with white blossoms on my left hand side, this entire area was blackthorn hedging, and my lovely husband dug it all out by hand. So let me show you how that happened. This shows the state and depth of that blackthorn hedge. It wasn't neat at all. The trees had been left unchecked, and as a result the branches had twisted around each other, making separating them very, very difficult. Something that Hugh had to be very conscious of was preventing injury from the thorns on those blackthorn. This gives you an idea of just how large they are, and trying to avoid them and twisted branches is very, very hard to do. Every stump that was exposed had to be dug out of the soil. This meant finding as many of the main roots as possible around the base, chopping through those roots, removing as many of them as possible, and then levering out the stump with a crowbar. We had piles and piles of brushwood that needed to be burnt to dispose of it. It had no practical value, but there was one advantage. The whole exercise had produced a lot of useful firewood that we seasoned for 2 years and then used as fuel for our wood burners in the house. Finally, the field was dry, level and ready for a structure to be put in place with vegetables, fruit, an orchard and the chicken enclosure. We'd also created that little oasis of calm that we were trying to achieve in the garden at the front of the cottage. We finally had a place to relax. I hope you found that useful. In part 3, we're going to look at the barns and what it took to get those in a serviceable order. If you've enjoyed today's content, take a moment to give me a thumbs up below. If you're not already a subscriber, take a second to do that and hit the notifications icon, and you'll get to hear of any new videos, including part 3, as soon as it becomes available. If you've got any questions for me, leave it in the comments section and I'll do my best to get back to you as soon as possible. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.